Right. Okay, so we're live. Let me double check. Yeah, okay. So, Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, the Thrice Greatest. This is probably my favorite subject that I cover on this channel. And it's a difficult one because there are so many different strains of Hermeticism. And I have to be careful about the way that I speak about these things because out of habit, I'll say things like the Hermetic teachings. But I don't really see it as being about teachings. It's about process. It's about a protocol for learning to interpret the book of nature, to read the allegories. It's about cultivating a certain kind of state of mind and catalyzing internal processes that lead to real gnosis. Hermes Trismegistus probably never existed. It's all pseudo-epigraphical. And just to, get a few things out of the way right out the bat, the context. I don't consider the kind of Hermeticism that emerged in France in the 3rd century to be the real Hermeticism. This is a much older... it's not a doctrine, it's a way of understanding the universe. It has been called the Theologia Prisca, which means the, pure truth, basically, which is what Hermeticism is believed to be by a lot of people, including myself. If we're talking about the true secret doctrine, So, before I get into all that, I want to thank those of you that have supported us. I'm having a bunch of health problems that all require surgeries. That work has started. So that's why I was saying, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to talk tonight. And hopefully it's not too distracting. And I can stay on point. So, it's such a huge and sprawling subject that it's really difficult to find a place to latch onto to get started. But I'll talk a little bit about my own history with it. My own metaphysics or my spiritual, beliefs, although I don't like to think of it that way, more like inclinations, It's almost as if I was born with it fully intact. And discovering Hermeticism and a lot of related philosophies was kind of just like confirmation that this had been seen by other people, In fact, I talk a lot about synchronicities. In fact, tomorrow I'm going to do a belated 11/11 because my internet was out on 11/11. And I'm going to talk about synchronicity and the mechanistic basis behind it, and then I'm going to play music for many hours probably. I've actually been playing guitar like 6 to 8 hours a day for 2 weeks or something, almost every day. So I'm hoping it's going to be fire, and it's another crowdfunding for surgeries marathon. So don't miss that. But one of these synchronicities, and these are among the most interesting type for me, they're understood retroactively, right? So when I was, I think 11 years old, one of my first girlfriends named my unit Hermes. I didn't know who Hermes was. I knew it was a Greek god, but I actually hated it because I thought that doesn't sound like a masculine name for a dong, It sounded kind of wimpy and nerdy, and I didn't like it. But this is your wand. This is your identity, In retrospect, having later discovered that my own philosophy or outlook, my ontology, I guess, was Hermetic from birth, that girl naming my wand Hermes really stood out, So that's really the first, appearance, I guess, of Hermes in my world. And of course, over the years, I was just naturally inclined to be into music and interested in alchemy and science and nature and, all of the stuff that is associated with Hermes. And so, you guys probably are familiar with my channel. I mean, all of the things that are attributed to Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, that's what my channel is, and it's not deliberate. It's just a predisposition to this kind of Hermetic stuff. And eventually it led to taking initiation in a couple of Hermetic fraternities. And so here we are. A really interesting aspect of this as well is that Hermes is said to be met at crossroads, right? And he's often depicted with horns. And this is interesting. It's kind of an addendum, but, Lucifer, horns, god of magic and music. Pythagoras actually means the old serpent. Same archetype. Legba, the African. There's actually a few different African tribes that have a horned entity that you meet at the crossroads that's a god of music and magic. Brazil has a few cultures that have this legend that almost leads one to believe that this is a real entity. And probably most interestingly, on a personal level, when I really started to understand the depth of my connection with this during the Phoenix process, I was literally living at the corner of a crossroads when I met Hermes. And now we find ourselves in macro, collectively, at a crossroads. And there's a resurgence of interest in Hermetic thought and Hermetic sciences and alchemy and all of these things. So here we are at a crossroads, and Hermes is there to greet us and to guide us. It really is a tremendous thing, and the fundamental truth of it, the primary constituent of the protocol, right, is seeing nature as allegory and learning to read the book of nature to perceive the signs, symbols, hints, and clues, writings on the wall. The rest is up to you. To see the world through the eyes of Hermes is to recognize that all that is metaphor, right? And also that the subconscious mind gives us hints and things emerge as the Hermes wand did for me as a child, that are understood retroactively, right? Like, for example, Mercury, the closest planet to the sun, which is the symbol for gold. Mercury, knock a proton off, it's gold. When those planets and the sun were given their names, that was not known. So that's the kind of just an example of the manifestations of the universal mind. So I had another one on the tip of my tongue. Oh yeah, this is great. Before we get into the Pymander, I'm just going to say a few things about this. In case you didn't read the description, this is going to be a long series, and tonight we're just going to look at the introduction of the 1650 printing, the first translation from the Arabic of the Pymander. Hermes was said to have encountered a dragon of light that gave him this knowledge, and from that he was able to bring medicine, philosophy, magic, music, and a few other subjects, writing, to humanity. And this book is partly a description of that, and, you'll see. 1650, though, ancient. But a couple of things I've discovered recently that I wanted to share. If you follow me, you know that I have this interest in electromagnetism and light and a suspicion that is almost a certainty that our consciousness comes to us on the rays of the sun. This is another example of the universal mind or the subconscious revealing these things that we realize retroactively, right? So the sun, SOL, soul, you put you in it, and now you have an individual soul. Micro, macro, as above, so below. That whole thing, right? So when I arrived here in Peru, in the Sacred Valley, I went to the Temple of the Sun, which was a holy place of the Incas that was dedicated to sun worship. Inti is the name of the sun. And they call gold the sweat of Inti, right? And it turns out that when neutron stars collide, that's where most of the gold in the universe comes from, right? So it seems that they knew that gold came from stars. They also knew that consciousness comes from light and from stars. This knowledge was held by Zoroaster, by the Babylonians, Syrians, Aztecs, Incas, North American natives. In the 1851 Masonic tome, Morals and Dogma, what the hell's his name? Albert Pike says that in the olden days, man had the truth, and wandering in the darkness of superstition, he found error. And my research suggests that that really is literally true. And another little bit of evidence emerged in the last few days in that regard. Difficult to figure out where to start with this story. There are just so many branches and tendrils. But, okay, so Hermes, horns, psychopomp, music, magic, connection with Lucifer. His uncle is Hades. So that's kind of an interesting correlation, but nowhere near as important as the fact that his father was Zeus. What does Zeus throw at the earth? Electromagnetic bolts, right? Consciousness. Hermes, his son, the messenger of higher consciousness, his father's electromagnetic energy. It's, not certain, but it certainly seems like whoever created this story also was aware of these connections. One other thing I would like to mention before we get into the Pymander, and I'm not just going to read it, I'm going to offer a lot of commentary. If you're familiar with the Kabbalion, the author or authors mentions in the beginning that the teachings of Hermes eventually became convoluted and distorted and turned into Islam, Christianity, all of these religions around the world. And if you accept that Hermes was not actually a real person, but pseudo-epigraphical, what he's actually saying is that the perceptions of these truths were occulted and buried in these fairy tales. A lot of the stories in the Bible, as evidence of this, are also Hermes tales, like David and Goliath. Hermes slew a giant in a similar fashion. There are many of them. The god of music and magic and horns and associated with Lucifer. There's a tremendous amount of this, and my I don't know how to say this. Suspicion, I guess. It's not a suspicion. I know this. Illuminated people cannot be ruled. They do not need it, and they will not tolerate it. Right? So, as far back as Egypt, the pharaohs realized that the mysteries where people were taught to perceive the allegories of nature and to divine knowledge for themselves, they knew that was a threat. So they sent people in to sabotage, they banned them, they created the monotheistic Egyptian religion in an attempt to subvert and curtail these mystery religions from spreading. And around the time that happened, Pythagoras and I think Empedocles and two different mystery schools had come from Greece to Egypt, and they took the mysteries to Greece, where they were again banned, and archons, which was a title of a Roman magistrate, were sent in with the charge of destroying the mysteries. They were banned legally. Aristotle said, mankind is lost without this knowledge. In my opinion, he's absolutely correct. And so what they did, they took this knowledge that consciousness comes from light and that we are basically projections of the sun. And, a lot of other details we'll get into later. And they constructed a religion called Christianity that contained these bits of truth, these fragments. And when people encounter that truth, they know it. They know something resonates in them. But they engineered this new myth in a way that actually purposed it to intervene in the spiritual development and the genuine gnosis of people. They used dogma to turn this liberating, empowering illumination into a trap to make people easier to manipulate and ensure that they would be docile. And, there's really just semen retention. That's not something that I've really even given much thought to. All right, so let me go into my OBS, if I can find it, and get rid of my ugly mug, and we'll actually get into the material. I'm sure I had a lot more to say in this introduction, but like I said, I'm in a good bit of pain and a little bit doped up, so better to just dive into the introduction here. How do I do this? Screen capture. There we go. I don't think it's going to change the vertical, you guys, so I apologize about that. Okay, so I'm gone. Now, let's get into this. Hopefully you guys can all see that. I guess there's no reason to look at all the pretty pictures. But here's the title page, The Divine Pymander of Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, translated from the Arabic by Dr. Everard. The Creed of Mercurium Trismegistus. So let's see if I can figure out what that says, but I don't know the word fluorescu. Published in 1650. There's a Ouroboros with the four-headed creatures from the Merkaba, the Chariot of Light. Okay, so I'm old, my eyes are bad. Let me blow this up a little bit. The Greeks applied the name and term of Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus, so significant and suggestive, certainly to the Egyptian Thoth, as early as the 4th century BC. He was believed to be the origin of everything formed or produced by the human mind. He was therefore esteemed as the inventor of all the arts and sciences. And I actually have a strange little story to add to this. One of the things that I think we have diminished, I know we have, I don't know why I keep acting like I'm uncertain of things. Trying too hard to be humble or something, I don't know. But yeah, this is something that I know. We have diminished the value of intuition, and as a consequence of that, we have lost our intuition. And when it reemerges, we're full of doubt. And doubt makes an excellent mistress, but a nagging wife. So, on the one hand, we have a real problem in our culture with, the New Age movement and just the nature of people. They don't want to do a lot of tedious work. People tend to be naive and gullible. There's all kinds of reasons for this. But we generally see one of two extremes. People that start to believe in channeling or that they're psychic, and everything they think, they just accept. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the people that say all of that is just complete nonsense. There is a middle ground. A great example, Maynard James Keenan. I know I cite this one a lot. But Fear Inoculum, the song was about a pandemic that made people afraid of each other, and the album dropped, I think, 6 months before the pandemic. Asked about that, he said there are pattern recognition systems in the subconscious, and sometimes they're able to extend, it's basically just Fibonacci intuition, right? It's all mathematical. So there's that position where you acknowledge these things that mainstream culture says are woo, but you ground them in actual mechanistic, reality. There are ways, there are things that facilitate any occurrence on this plane. And that is, by the way, a perfect example of true Hermetic thinking, to dovetail science and mysticism, that these things should be complementary, and that actually, if you have a spiritual system or metaphysical, belief, and it requires you to abandon common sense and reason, it's probably no good. And science, with its insistence on placing its blinders, these assumptions, these a priori assumptions that limit the possibilities, in particular, the possibility that there's some sort of intelligence intrinsic in nature, then you have this mind, a lot of critics of like luciferian thinking that don't believe it's evil, but it's not good because it's all intellectual, it's all cerebral. So that's what science has done to itself. So it's like, mysticism without science is just a bunch of gobbledygook and nonsense and woo, and science without spirituality is just crisis of purpose, drives people mad. And so this, if we're successful, right, in making this the standard model, this old Hermetic knowledge, integrating it into the modern world, I really believe it's our only chance to redeem the human race. But if we're able to do that, the consequences of it will be extraordinary and beautiful and amazing. And if you follow my content, I'm constantly offering developments, Michael Levin and other scientists, that starting to sound a whole lot like Hermes. I feel like I never got to the... Okay, so here's an interesting example, and this, I went off on a rant. But what that originally reminded me of is that during this Phoenix process, when I was living at the crossroads, and this stuff started really opening up for me, I had the intuition that I had to get a hold of the Book of Thoth. And so I went to the local bookstore because I don't have bank accounts. I couldn't just order it on Amazon. I might not have even known that Amazon existed, honestly. And I ordered the Aleister Crowley book. And I got it, and it was just about the tarot, and I was really disappointed because I thought, it's got some really interesting chapters, but I was pretty disappointed. And then I think later that day or something, I would have this voice that would pop into my head and tell me stuff during this period. It still does, but not as often. And it said, no, that's not the right Book of Thoth. There's another Book of Thoth that isn't actually written. And it went on to explain that it's more like the Akashic Record or something. And a few years later, or maybe a year later, I discovered that actually is a legend, that there's this true Book of Thoth that can be accessed through spiritual development and developing intuition and also worldly education and all the sciences, etc. So, not sure if I've accessed it or not, but that was a trip. Okay, so he was the contriver, he was therefore esteemed as the inventor of all the arts and sciences. He was the contriver of hieroglyphics, Can I make this bigger? Maybe my whole screen? No, I can make it vanish, I guess. Of these, there were various kinds of hieroglyphics. There was a profound system of hieroglyphical rendering adopted among the Egyptians, the true meaning of which was only known to the higher ranks of the priests. There were other systems of representation by marks or figures which were less reserved, and some of these mysterious signs were fitted or adapted for the comprehension of the multitude. Hermes was the prolific and versatile interpreter between nature and man, the repository from which issued all the application of the methods of explaining the phenomena of nature and their uses perceived by the human mind. In his hands and through his means lay the demonstration of the conclusions of reason. The epithet Trismegistus, or superlatively greatest, as applied to Hermes, is of comparatively late origin and cannot be traced to any author earlier than the 2nd Christian century. Most probably it arose out of the earlier forms derived by the Greeks from pristine Egyptian sources, but various other explanations of the appellation have been offered, such as that of the author of the Chronicon Alexandrinum, who maintains that it was because Hermes, while maintaining the unity of God, had also asserted the existence of 3 supreme or greatest powers, that he was called by the Egyptians Trismegistus. This is really interesting too. Everyone knows about the Trinity, but less common knowledge is that most of the ancients actually recognized 3 elements, and the 4th was derivative of those other 3. And there are lots of different expressions of this. For example, we have the 4 fundamental forces of physics that correspond to 4 elements in 4 directions. And the thing is, gravity may be demoted because it's actually derivative of the other 3. And one of the great examples, I guess, elucidations of as above, so below, is that everything is based on the same schematic. Everything has the same blueprint. So you have a chord in music. You have 3 tones, you know, and on and on, you know. And then also with the thrice greatest thing, the 3, these fundamental structural constituent elements of our universe translate their sort of fundamental power across the board, right? So the third eye, saying things 3 times when we do magic. That's common throughout numerous cultures, you know, and on and on. So part of what I'm getting at here is that in this system of thinking, you are never expected to accept anything on faith. You are never expected to accept doctrinal dogma. You are able, your success will be your proof, you know. When something is posited in the Hermetic court, it will be, you will be able to relate it to phenomena in such a way that you'll be able to verify the veracity of this knowledge. There's no, you know, faith required of you. And that's one of the most important things about this, because generally religion is designed to require people to abandon their own critical thinking, their own methodologies, their own assumptions and processes in favor of just blindly, you know, inculcating some doctrine and trying to follow along with it. That's also fruitless, because real change comes from process. Something happens internally in this case that changes your behavior. And it's true that gnosis, real gnosis, divine revelation, experience of the transcendental, tends to transform people for the better, almost infallibly, you know, to varying degrees, but it pretty reliably does that. Trying to follow some doctrine because you feel obligated, people fail. In fact, the results are often incredibly undesirable, to put it mildly. Okay, so where were we? Of three supreme or greatest powers that he was called by the Egyptians Trismegistus. This view, which is also adopted by Suidas, seems preferable at least to that of Nicolai's History of Greek Literature, according to which an apocryphal author named Hermes was called something in Greek, simply in order to indicate that he had succeeded and outdone a certain Megistius of Smyrna in astrological, physiognomical, and alchemistic theories. The name of Hermes seems during the 3rd and following centuries to have been regarded as a convenient pseudonym to place at the head of the numerous syncretistic writings in which it was sought to combine. It's another interesting thing, that nothing can express or become anything that's not within its nature, right? So Hermes fundamentally was a combination of two cultures and two similar but different deities. And from that, what grew out of this syncretic character is a syncretic system of spirituality. The mystery schools and Freemasonry are basically Hermetic mystery schools. And over the centuries, what they have done is compiled all of the most powerful ideas, separating the wheat from the chaff, adepts doing this and compiling it under, one roof, so to speak, a compendium of occult and spiritual knowledge from all over the world, all different systems, and very carefully, great minds applied to separate the wheat from the chaff and distill it into hopefully something greater. In which it was sought to combine Neoplatonic philosophy, Philonic Judaism, and Kabbalistic theosophy, and so provide the world with some acceptable substitute for the Christianity, which had even at that time begun to give indications of the ascendancy it was destined afterwards to attain. One of these pseudo-epigraphic Hermetic writings, some have come down to us in the original Greek, others survive in Latin or Arabic translations, but the majority appear to have been perished. For any of you guys that haven't read The Lament of Hermes in the book of Asclepius, I would strongly recommend that because it is one of the most convincing pieces of prophetical writing that we have on this planet. Just as a side note. That portion of the writings ascribed to Hermes Trismegistus, which is best known, and which is most beyond dispute, forms in its translation the greater part of the present edition. It bears its own expressions of excellence and authority, in that it is not only vividly written, but it was the work of the most learnedly accomplished man of his age, Dr. Everard, a rich addition to the present publication, in regard to which work the great pains taken with it are evident. It is the important illustration, the 21st key of the correct tarot, along with the above enumerated works of Hermes Trismegistus, are usually printed the certainly later definitions of Asclepius, which have sometimes been erroneously attributed to Apuleius. Other Hermetic writings which have been preserved and which have been for the most part collected by Patricius in the Nova de Universis Philosophia. I don't really know that we need to go through every bit of this. The connection of the name Hermes with alchemy will explain what is meant by Hermetic sealing, and will account for the use of the phrase Hermetic medicine by Paracelsus, or also for the so-called Hermetic Freemasonry of the Middle Ages. That's not quite true, I don't think. I mean, it is true, but there's a more important underlying theme there. Hermetically sealed. Secret, sacred, secret. This is part of almost every magical tradition across the entire planet. It has caused a tremendous amount of suspicion towards Freemasonry and other Hermetic societies, in some cases justified, but the reason for secrecy is not really about the consolidation of power for selfish purposes. it can be. But in South America, shamanism, shamans generally will not share their recipes. Oftentimes, they won't reveal the names of spirits that they have relationships with. The Eleusinian mysteries, if you spoke about the things that were discussed, you could be killed or excommunicated. So this hermetically sealed thing, but there's an even deeper meaning and a more important one. If you have not had initiation, and by the way, initiation does not require you to have been initiated by another person, and this is a dangerous idea because it can give rise to cowens, which are people who either are faking or believe themselves to be initiates when they are not. I thought I had it right here. Morals and Dogma, the 33rd degree Freemason Albert Pike mentions that many initiates receive their initiation on the rays of the sun and have never stepped foot into a lodge. So, we can reframe this and use different terminology. If you have not catalyzed these internal processes, if you have not developed the intellectual and emotional and spiritual capacity to receive this knowledge, it's hermetically sealed. It doesn't matter. I can tell you all day and all night. And in the Kabbalion, it says what? The lips of wisdom are sealed, but to the lips of wisdom are sealed, except to the ears. You know what I'm getting at. I don't remember the quote, but that's the thing. That's what hermetically sealed really means. That you're not going to understand Hermes until you have developed yourself to a certain point and had certain types of experiences anyways. Hermes was called by the Egyptians Thoth, and Thoth. It is concluded that because of his learning and address, and in wonder at his profound skill in the arts and sciences, that the people gave him the name of Trismegistus, or the Thrice Great Thoth, or the being named with the varieties of appellation, taught. He taught. Oh my God, how am I just now realizing? Is that really the etymology of taught? Or is that just one of those synchronicities? That's wild. There shouldn't be a connection. Interesting. Was a counselor and friend of Osiris. This much has been declared of him by Diodorus Siculus. He was left by Osiris to assist Isis with his counsels and the government of the country when Osiris embarked in the design of regenerating the earth and visiting and civilizing the several nations. The historian adds that Hermes improved language, invented letters, instituted religious rites, taught mankind a consistent and philosophical knowledge of providence, instructed in astronomy, music, and other arts. Many are of opinion that this Thoth or Hermes lived long before the time of Moses. Some have been so fanciful as to make him one with Adam, Cadmon, while nearly all historiographers and surrounding his character and doings with mystery ascribe to him the power of magic, if not the very invention of magic itself. There have not been wanting those who have looked upon him as the same person as Enoch or Canaan, or as the patriarch Joseph. Perhaps in spite of all the foregoing exaggerations, which men are always the lot of very great and highly distinguished men who become deified in after times, the most probable judgment to be formed concerning him is that he was some person of superior genius who before the time of Moses had invented useful arts and taught the first rudiments of science, and who caused his instructions to be engraved in emblematic figures, hieroglyphics upon tables or columns of stone, obelisks, which he dispersed over the country, for the purpose of enlightening the people and of fixing the worship of the gods. And it is reasonable to conclude that the same symbolic inscriptions were made use of in calling up and inspiring the awe inseparable from the contemplation of spiritual beings, the guardians of the lives of men and the disposers of their fates. Maxims of political and mortal wisdom went hand in hand with these religious teachings. So something that I failed to mention earlier I was talking about how, in the Kabbalion, this knowledge is what lies behind all of these religions, and that they were distorted and convoluted and actually sort of inverted to work against the common people. One of the worst examples of that, the most unfortunate, is the exclusivity clause of Islam and Christianity is thought by many to be a perversion of the fact that the Hermetic knowledge was known to be the Theologia Prisca, the perennial philosophy of Aldous Huxley, the real truth that lies behind everything. The difference is, of course, in Christianity, if you do not devote your... I don't even know what it is. What are they devoting? Like that, I give myself to Christ, that sort of thing. Then you're not included. The truth is the truth. And this is a very sticky area because when people come along and say, I have the truth, the real, true spiritual, the true religion, whatever, it's almost always calamitous, and they're just madmen or exploiters, psychopaths, sociopaths, whatever they are. It's not a good thing. But the reality is that if there is more to the universe than just random coincidence and mindless gobbledygook, if there even is some integrated intelligence, there's only one truth. There's only one way that the universe came into existence. Whatever the limitations and abilities of magic are, that's a truth, So it's very sticky territory to say that this is the Theologia Prisca, because that has been abused and contorted by these religions that create this exclusivity clause with a totally different intention. It's not Hermes' fault that the truth is the truth, and he knew what it was, but it may be, in a sense, Hermes' fault that these religions got the idea to have that, to make that claim. That's what is asserted by some people. Another Thoth, or Hermes, is said to have lived at a later period. He was equally celebrated with the former, and to him is particularly appropriated by some the name of Trismegistus. According to Manetho, he translated from engraved tables of stone, which had been buried in the earth, and sacred characters of the first Hermes, and wrote the explanation of them in books which were deposited in Egyptian temples. The same author calls him the son of Agathodamon, and adds that to him are ascribed the restoration of the wisdom taught by the first Hermes and the revival of geometry, arithmetic, and the arts among the Egyptians after they had been lost or neglected. By the interpretation which he gave of the symbols inscribed upon the ancient tables or columns, he obtained the sanction of antiquity to his own institutions. Speaking of that, I'm sure you guys have noticed this probably a long time ago, or immediately, but the institutionalized religions, you are supposed to have faith, and your knowledge of God is derived from a book. In the case of Christianity, one full of infanticide and incest and, Satan torturing Job under the orders of God, even though he's supposed to be rebellious and defying God. That's what he's in trouble for. All this stuff, you guys know the story. The sacrifice of his own innocent child, which is something that, supposedly Satanists are evil for doing, but the God of Christianity can do that, and it's totally fine. But if you notice in Hermeticism, most of the focus is on philosophy, mathematics, geometry, studying nature. If there is a God, studying its creation, the expression of its being, would be the way to have knowledge of God. So, insanely important distinction. And, if you think about it, it's really the only system that I'm aware of that really incorporates that as like a fundamentally important aspect, So, to perpetuate their influence upon the minds of the people, he committed the columns with his own interpretation to the care of the priesthood. Way to go, dude. Hence, he obtained a high degree of respect among the people and was long revered as the restorer of learning and the arts. He is said to have written a very large number of books as commentaries upon the tables of the first Hermes, which treated of universal principles of the nature of the universe and the soul of man, of the governing of the world by the movements of the stars, otherwise in astrology, of the divine light, and of its shadow, or of its other side, presented away, in the mortal life, or of the articulate breath or inspiration, or means of being in this world, which, in contradistinction to the life of the unbodied light, is the darkness. All these ultra-profound ideas were treated of in the theosophical teaching, strictly Platonic as it afterwards became, of Hermes the Thrice Great. He discourses of the nature and orders of the celestial beings, the populace of the elements, and herein he enunciates all the Kabbalistic notions of the Rosicrucians. He reduces astrology to a system. He produces treatises on medicine, and enlarges in a brilliant and inspired manner on all the positive and recognizable side of anatomy, and also upon the mysticism connected with the origin and working of the world and of the nature of the life of man. Clemens of Alexandria gives an account of his having written 32 books upon theology and philosophy and 6 upon medicine, and mentions the particular subjects of some of them, but they are no longer in existence. The burning of the library in Alexandria, bad news, bad news. I did have a thought. Something was triggered, and I'm trying to see if I can dredge it back up before moving on. Astrology, medicine, anatomy. What the hell was I thinking? Damn. Hope it comes back. The 2 dialogues which have been attributed to him, one of which is the present reproduction, and the other, Asclepius, also numbered in the present work, Pymander and Asclepius, so known from the names of the principal speakers in them, are most striking and eloquent. They give eloquent proof of the greatness of the author, real or supposed, but we are inclined to the opinion that he was a real being, supernaturally gifted, and thus offering to the world 2 characters, the one human, the other spiritual and divine. Man, it's really driving me nuts that whatever that was I was going to say slipped my mind. Let me see. Let me take a break from reading and check the chat. I don't know how long this introduction is. We may have to finish it in a future, but I just want to check in with the chat and see if there's anything that needs addressing. Okay, let's get back into it. Damn it, whatever was in my mind that slipped, man, it's really pissing me off. The titles appropriated to Hermes Mercurius Trismegistus were in part the titles of the deity. Thuth, Thoth, Tot, Taantes were the same title diversified, and they belonged to the chief god of Egypt. Eusebius speaks of him as the same as Hermes. From Thuth, the Greeks formed Zeus, or Theos. I thought that said Zeus, I could be wrong. Which, with that nation, was the most general name of the deity. Plato, in his treatise named Philebus, mentions him by the name of Thuth. I don't know the Greek. He was looked upon as a great benefactor and the first cultivator of the vine. He was also supposed to have found out letters, which invention is likewise attributed to Hermes. Suidas calls him Thus and says that he was the same as Ares, and so worshipped at Petra. Instead of a statue, there was Lithos, Melis, Tetragonos, Autopotos, a black square pillar of stone without any figure or representation. It was the same deity which the Germans and Celts worshipped under the name of Thut-At, or Thutates, whose sacrifices were very cruel, as we learn from Lucan. I'm not sure if this black stone is related to the one at Mecca, but I would assume so. The Hermetic or Hermetical art is a name given to chemistry, or the supposition that Hermes Trismegistus was the inventor of chemistry, or that he excelled in it. Very little is known indeed of this Hermes, and still less of how much or how little he had to do with the invention of the art of chemistry. He is reputed to be an ancient king of Egypt by some who have endeavored to trace his history. The era of Asclepius is ancient enough, but these explorers will insist that the age of Hermes Trismegistus far preceded it. These assign his time to 1,000 years before the period of Aesculapius. They carry Hermes Trismegistus into perfect mystery. Zosimus Panopolidi mentions him as having wrote of natural things, and there are many pieces existent under his name which are certainly, to speak the least of them, under some doubt. The numerous books upon theology, astronomy, and medicine are ascribed by Martium to the second Mercury, the son of Vulcan, who, according to Eusebius, lived a little after Moses and is about 50 years after the exodus of the Israelites. This learned author, relying upon the authority of Manetho, cited by Syncellus, reckons that this second Mercury is he who is named Trismegistus or Thrice Great. According to Manetho, this second Hermes or Mercury translated from engraved tables of stone that had been hidden in the earth the sacred characters written by the first Hermes or Mercury, called Thoth or Thoth, and wrote the explanations in books which have deposited in the Egyptian temples. He thus established a divine authority, obtained a high degree of respect among the people, and was long revered as the restorer of learning. From the tables of the first Hermes, he is said to have written, as commentaries and explanation, an incredible number of books. And so, history is a bunch of repeating patterns. Everything is, including periods of time. You know, there are variations, but like right now, we have war brewing. There was a bunch of civil rights, racial stuff in the United States, psychedelic renaissance, a Kennedy running for president. Sound familiar? You know, it all happened before. And something I just noticed reading through this is he keeps referencing in Egypt that he was restoring learning. And so we are in this low point, as far as I can tell, culturally, where people don't seem to have much in the way of critical thinking skills. And, you know, there's sort of an anti-intellectual current that is pretty powerful right now. And so here is the reemergence of Hermes at exactly the same time, it sounds, as it happened in this other empire. That would also be an example of Hermetic understanding. It was impossible for the Egyptians to carry their veneration for them higher than they did. They were borne in their processions with great ceremony and respect. First of all appeared the chanter, who had two of them in his hands, one containing the hymns in honor of the gods, and the other rules according to which the kings were to govern. Next came the horoscopus, or that minister, as Clemens informs us, who carried the 4 books of astronomy, one treating of the fixed stars, another of the eclipses of the sun and moon, and the 2 last of the rising of these 2 luminaries. Then appeared the sacred scribe, with 10 books that treated of cosmography, geography, and inscription denial, etc. There's something that I missed. Apologize. So got to go back to where he was talking about the pre-Moses thing and how he established this divine authority. I believe it's the book of Exodus. Is it Exodus or the other E one? Where the metal tent comes and, you know, there's this God is supposedly in it, but only Moses is allowed to see his face. He knows how to contract diseases from people with sores. You know, he seems to know about medicine. If you piss the thing off, you have to come stand behind the tent. Fire comes out and fries the person. They were told to follow the flames during the day, or the flames at night and the smoke during the day, like it had a combustion engine. And, you know, on and on. All of this weird stuff with this apparent alien in a UFO that these, you know, tribal people thought was God because it's flying around blowing shit up. It would blow up enemy tribal people, and it had apparently a political agenda. Very odd. But some have suggested that that was Thoth in that thing, or Hermes, as it were. Okay. Then appeared the sacred scribe with 10 books that treated of cosmography, geography, the description of the Nile, etc. They followed the stolist with other 10 books on the subject of religion, namely sacrifices, prayers, festivals, days, etc. The prophet came next, and with 10 books, which were named sacerdotal, and treated of the laws of the gods and of ecclesiastical discipline. Thus, says the author now cited, there were 42 books in all, of which 36 comprehended all that belonged to the Egyptian philosophy. The other 6 books regarded medicine, treated of anatomy, medicaments, the diseases of the eyes of women, and of regulations to be practiced on domestic association. These books, at all events, in any number long ago lost, if any answering the above descriptions ever existed, at least in the manner stated of them, furnished Sanchoniathon with the materials for his theogony. Many subjects on which these writings are said to have treated are generally supposed to have been unknown in the early period of the Egyptian philosophy. By the way, I want to take a second to mention we are demonetized, and so we get no support from YouTube. So please at least hit the like button and consider subscribing. Turn your bell notifications on if you do. And you can support the channel by becoming a patron, or there are options in the chat to make a one-time contribution to support our efforts. If we consult alchemical manuscripts, no matter the date or author or language, we find constant mention of Hermes Trismegistus, who was indeed considered and sometimes designated the father of alchemy. In a treatise attributed to Albertus Magnus, we are told that the tomb of Hermes was discovered by Alexander the Great in a cave near Hebron. In it was found a slab of emerald, which had been taken from the hands of the dead Hermes by Sarah, the wife of Abraham, and which had inscribed upon it in Phoenician characters the precepts of the great master concerning the art of making gold. The inscription consisted of 13 sentences and is to be found in numerous alchemical works. It is, for the most part, very difficult to be understood, and in this respect, closely resembles most of the great mass of the middle-aged alchemical literature. Now, Hermes, with the association with Mercury, there's another level to this association that would kind of imply, were it true, that Hermes would be the one that had known how to perform alchemy, because his father was Zeus, whose electrical charges, right? In the 1851 book Morals and Dogma, Albert Pike actually describes how the ancient alchemists would use an electrical charge to convert mercury to gold. And it's not lead into gold as many people think. The thing that does the transforming, obviously mercury. And of course now today we know that if you use the proper charge of electricity, knock a proton off of mercury, it becomes gold. And so that fact that Hermes was the son of the electromagnetic bolt throwing, it just seems like another little clue regarding these mysteries of mysteries. The following is cited as the inscription of the Smaragdine table, and is to be found in very early MSS in various languages. Firstly, I speak not fictitious things, but that which is certain and most true. Secondly, what is below is like that which is above, and what is above is like that which is below, to accomplish the miracle of one thing. Thirdly, and as all things were produced by the one world of one being, and so all things were produced from this one thing by adaptation. Fourthly, its father is the sun, its mother the moon, the wind carries it in its belly, its nurse is the earth. Fifthly, it is the father of all perfection throughout the world. Sixthly, the power is vigorous if it be changed into earth. Seventhly, separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, acting prudently and with judgment. Eighthly, ascend with the greatest sagacity from the earth to heaven, and then again descend to the earth, and unite together the powers of things superior and things inferior. Thus you will obtain the glory of the whole world, and obscurity will fly away from you. Ninthly, This has more fortitude than fortitude itself, because it conquers every subtle thing and can penetrate every solid. 10thly, thus was the world formed. 11thly, hence proceed wonders which are here established. 12thly, therefore I am called Hermes Trismegistus, having 3 parts of the philosophy of the whole world. 13thly, that which I had to say concerning the operation of the sun is completed. Considering whether to continue on with this now or not, my jaw really is starting to bother me. Let's continue a little bit. The story and the inscription, together with all books attributed to Hermes, who is asserted to have lived about 2000 BC, are still a matter of dispute, occasionally vehement among the learned. In spite of the obvious difficulty of interpretation of the inscription of the Emerald Table, men and men of extraordinary capacity have not been wanting, who have labored long and lovingly to prove its authenticity, to interpret it, and to show that it is in good sooth a marvelous revelation full of sublime secrets and considerable import to mankind. I actually have, incidentally, a bit more explanation along these lines. Earlier today, I did a secret stream with my patrons where we have been working through Masonic degrees for 6 years or something, and we've only gotten through 2 of them. I think it's been 4 years, 3 or 4 years. This whole thing of the interaction of these 2 antinomies. If I can find it quickly, I'll share a little bit of that. Yeah, so in the mysteries was also taught the division of the universal cause into an active and a passive cause, of which 2, Osiris and Isis, the heavens and the earth, were symbols. These 2 first causes, into which it was held that the great universal first cause at the beginning of things divided itself, were the 2 great divinities, whose worship was, according to Varro, inculcated upon the initiates at Samothrace. As is taught, he says, in the initiation into the mysteries, heaven and earth are regarded as the first 2 divinities. They are the potent gods worshipped in that island, and whose names are consecrated in the books of our augurs. One of them is male, the other female, and they bear the same relation to each other as the soul does to the body, humidity to dryness. These 2 divinities, active and passive principles of the universe, were commonly symbolized by the generative parts of man and woman, to which in remote ages no idea of indecency was attached, the phallus and the cetus, emblems of generation and production, and which as such appeared in the mysteries. And so on, and light and darkness in these interactions. And so just to offer a little bit more elucidation on what this is about, you know, the one thing, according to this line of thinking, was nothing, an absolute nothingness. And that is where paradox basically came from. That is why everything has within it paradox. Everything contains its contradiction. And so there was a thought, and that thought caused this thing to become 2 things, because now there is an awareness and there is this space. And what he was describing, or at least part of it, the hint that he was giving about alchemy, is that everything that came after was, in a sense, mirroring that original process. And if you watch a cell divide, you'll see that all things, you know, have as their origin, all living things at least, which the universe is in this context, that, you know, they're mirroring with variation, replication by means of reflection with variation, in order to create this multitude of the 10,000 things. It's probably good enough on that subject. So people have tried to prove the Emerald Tablets. Supposedly they're debunked and show that it is, in good sooth, a marvelous revelation full of sublime secrets of considerable import to mankind. It's absolutely true. And it's very simple, you know. But again, it's a little bit cryptic, so that if you have not at least already planted the seed and given it some fertilization and some water, you know, it's not going to divide and then divide again in your mind into all of this wonderful revelation and information. So, how did I just get lost? Did I scroll too far or something? Okay, there we go, yeah. Hermes Trismegistus is generally asserted by the alchemists to have been a priest who lived a little after the time of Moses. According to Clemens Alexandrinus, he was the author of 42 books containing all the learning of the Egyptians. Others tell us that he was the author of several thousand volumes. Plato speaks of him in the Phaedrus as the inventor of numbers and letters. He was, in fact, the Egyptian god of letters, and as such, of course, could be described as the author of multitudinous works. He was the deified intellect, and hence has often been confounded with Thoth, the intellect. That's an important little nugget there. Sir Gardner Wilkinson speaks of Hermes as an emanation of Thoth and is representing the abstract quality of the understanding. It may be well to note the extent of the symbolism associated with the sculptured representations and with the hieroglyphics associated with the name of Hermes Trismegistus. In one hand, Hermes holds the crux ansata, the symbol of life, a master symbol which is the most persistent and determined in its appearance and in its reappearance in all the sculptures of Egypt. In the other hand, the figure grasps a staff associated with which are a serpent, a scorpion, a hawk's head, and above all, a circle surrounded by an asp, each with its special symbolical significance. On the Rosetta Stone, Hermes is called the Great and Great or Twice Great. He was called Trismegistus or Thrice Great according to the 12th aphorism of the Emerald Table because he possessed 3 parts of the wisdom of the whole world. And we're actually going to stop there because this dental medical crisis here is starting to, it's just too much talking. So let me pull myself back up, and if you guys have any questions or comments or insights you want to share, I can take a few minutes to do that. And then we will pick this up once a week, I guess. We'll chew through this. Do that. And this. Okay. Hello again. What are your opinions on Rudolf Steiner and Helena P. Blavatsky and the origins of the New Age movement being in Theosophy, Lucer magazine, and all that? Yeah, okay. So the first thing that I see is well, that's the thing. There's Wesley Pipes saying, how can you take a belief system and turn it into a system, make it make sense? This is not about belief. This is about observation. It's about a system of perceiving the world. It's not about accepting any dogma or any, prefabricated system. It's about independent observation and personal development. So that's it. Yeah, I mean, I could slow down a bit, but I was trying to get through that introduction. I guess maybe my jaw's just making me push a little bit fast. I only asked because I want to... Okay, so I saw something I was going to answer that... Okay, Rudolf Steiner and Helena Blavatsky. Steiner, basically took Crowley and tried to make it like a fluffier hippie version that was like less abrasive. But a lot of his stuff is drawn from Crowley, and I prefer just to go to the horse's mouth. I haven't read a lot of Steiner. His tone and I just don't really dig the energy of it, I guess. And Blavatsky, on the other hand, was tremendously impressive. She was I think, Prussian princess, some Near Eastern country, and she spoke, I think, 22 languages, and how she became such an advanced mystic, I'm not really sure, but she was definitely legitimately a genius. And speaking of Aleister Crowley, he didn't really have the highest regard for women in a lot of ways. In some ways he did, it was a huge conflict with him, I think, because part of him worshipped women, but then he hated his mother. So he had like this psychological dissonance that he was dealing with. But Blavatsky, he actually did commentary similar to what I'm doing with this Hermes Pymander thing here, to Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine. I think it was the Secret Doctrine. And it was all very positive, and, he was not critical of her. And so that says a lot that, Crowley was obviously held her in high regard. And the thing about the Lucifer connection, people just don't understand what that is. That's Hermes. That's Hermes. And the reason that Lucifer is chosen as an archetype kind of has a lot to do just with like rebellion and just taking a position that is exactly antinomous to the mainstream institutionalized religion that has been destroying humanity and wrecking culture, and just, an absolute disaster of a train wreck. But it is true that she originally called her publishing company Lucifer Publishing, and she changed it to Lucis because it, rankled too many feathers or something. And I had read that, but I'd never seen proof. And one day I was in a bookstore in Humboldt County, California, and I found an old first edition copy of The Secret Doctrine and opened it up. And behind the dust jacket, if you open the dust jacket, there was a stamp in it that said Lucifer Trust. That it was published by Lucifer Trust. But yeah, I think that Blavatsky was one of the most illuminated adepts. A lot of her writing is incredibly, insightful and lucid and brilliant. And there's some stuff that, you got to take odds with, I would say, but that's true of all of this stuff. If all of these things had been discovered and formatted, and if there was no job left for us to do, I sincerely believe we wouldn't be here. The idea is that the universe is generating all the possibilities that it can within the constraints of natural law, and then it just collapses, and that's the end of it. So we're here for a reason. And so Blavatsky's not perfect. Steiner's not perfect. Crowley wasn't perfect. I'm not perfect. None of our ancestors are perfect. If they were, we certainly wouldn't be in the middle of this chaostrophe that we're dealing with at the present juncture. So okay, so I don't see too many questions there. Join me tomorrow. I'm going to eat some natalensis and talk about synchronicity, and then play music for hours. And then next week we'll do part 2 of this. I don't know how much further we have to go. I see we have a lot of likes this time. That is really good, because this, of all of the material that I create, this subject is, the core of it, really. So I'm glad to see people are showing up and digging it. I wish my jaw wasn't killing me. I just had a root canal. I have to have another one before I have the surgery. I have to get all this other work done. So yeah, it's just really uncomfortable to talk right now. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. Please hit the like button, share, subscribe. Consider becoming a patron. You get access to all kinds of information along these lines that was previously secret. This book has a stamp in the front that says that it's to be returned to the lodge upon death or withdrawal of the Mason who has been given it. And that is what we're using as our source. So yeah, Lucifer is Prometheus, the light bearer. That's the whole thing of that. It's always, he who speaks the truth has few friends, right? The old African proverb. The light bearer, everything has been reversed in order to control and manipulate and subjugate. So, man, thank you guys so much for being here, and please hit your bell notification so you don't miss part 2. And eventually we're going to get into the actual Hermetic stuff. This introduction has been pretty wild, though. It's been a good good stream. So thank you guys so much, and I'll see you tomorrow.